in with you today. Got a really great show, pretty much all about the vestibular sense. It's our sixth sense, if you could call that, but it's our eighth cranial nerve, and it's the very first sense to form on Earth in the ectoderm stage in embryology. You can imagine like a little stone and something inside a shell, and that sensation of gravity moving inside the shell caused a sensation of up and down and this sort of thing. It's the vestibular sense is probably not too known at all. In Neuro Linguistics, the poorest insight. In whole brain function, of course, it's a primary distinction of whole brain functioning is understanding how the vestibular sense is used. So as with somebody's in feeling balance, as you're balanced in life, and you could feel that our senses and motor, muscle, motor movement, so sensory and motor movement, a meta sense over the top of all the other senses is the vestibular sense. And so you've got three semicircular canals on either side of the head, and you've got saccule and otolith, which get a sense of up and down and forward and back. And those words are vestibular: forward, back, up, down, and direction. Where direction is used, it's the use of the vestibular sense that's applying this. And so all the other senses are connected through the vestibular sense. So you could turn, which is vestibular, up, which is vestibular, sound or vision, which is auditory and visual. And it's sort of really how are you using your vestibular sense? And it's about equilibrium. And so where balance is you've got the vestibular sense in the way that this is being used. It's a meta sense over the top of all the other senses, which all the other senses is much more sub modalities, whereas the vestibular sense is a meta modality over the top of everything else. And so where you've got subject, object, verb, and you've got noun and verb, you've got words that join noun and verb together and describe a relation between the noun and the verb, and have a preposition that's within there in the way that something is connected. So where you use words like more as or while or during or before or after, it's much more cause and effect in the way that something is put versus just and, like where you're putting something together. And so the vestibular sense in the way that it's there being used, like forward, back, up, down, clauses of time, and in and out, are all words which relate to whole body movement, and all words which relate to whole body movement is the vestibular sense, just the same as for our listeners, going, getting, having, and doing is kinesthetic and feeling, and the sound of the words we're using to discuss, to mention, to admit, to explain, to read, the sound that clicks and that rings a bell is all auditory. And to get a clear perspective and get a frame of reference to be able to have seen the bigger picture is more visual. And whole brain functioning is more kinesthetic, auditory, visual in the way that somebody might be using their senses in the preferred mode of way that you're using your sense. And so the vestibular sense is like an endolymphatic inertia, gravitational, sort of gyroscopic server, really, and is regulating the static energy in the B field. It's sensing and also, volitional tonus. And so there's got two types of tonus, and these tonic forces magnetically, it's all sort of regulated by the vestibular sense. Okay. It's interesting because, like, we're the only species which really is cooking most everything out of, and the life force out of food, and then eating food which really doesn't have any life force much in it. And that cooking of the nutrient really does destroy a lot of things. Vitamin L, or N-acetylneurominic acid, which vitamin L is one of the major vitamins in milk and our species colostrum. And that surfactant is very different from other animals, quite considerable, matter of fact, and shows us to be plant-based. So where somebody consumes vitamin L or a surfactant that's from other things, it can't be broken down properly because no DNA much in the body of any nature is present, to have been able to break that down. So Life Hydrate, like one of the products that we have, assists to cause the water of the body to become more structured, and also causes membrane to be able to become active and cause a transfer of information and things and such like that. And so that's part of the reason why N-acetylneurominic acid is one of the primary substances in our species breast milk and in colostrum, quite considerable, matter of fact, because it makes this hexagonal water, and it's the only structured water which causes enzymes to function, plus H3O2, positive and negative, is the difference between the two often is like a voltage, and so it's like a battery, more or less, where the body is. And the digestion and being able to have gastrin cause hydrochloric acid to be released, and then secretin to cause alkali element to be secreted. You've got a balance of things that goes on where nutrient is, and sugar molecule that's supposed to surround all the cells, called glycan, is supposed to be clean and not sort of all mixed up with protein and fat and things like that, which it modifies it. And glycan covers all the cells, so the cells are not just by themselves at all, but are always in a packing. And through the connective tissue and through the movement of the body and muscle and the sensation of all this, the vestibular sense is regulating the tonus to all the senses and the motor conditioning of the body, and it's supposed to have a pretty good, clean, clear message as it passes through everything. But glycan that surrounds all the cells can be mixed with a lot of protein and fat that's not broken down and modifies the glycan, the sugars, and causes it not to be proper in its clean state. And today, of course, somebody could do a glycan clock, or at least that you could see that that's possible scientific, but it does support this insight how life food, which is low methionine, low phosphate, and has a value more toward enzymatic conditioning of the food and things that's like that, and plant-based, it doesn't have any cross-reactivity of any nature, and otherwise all cooked dead food sure does have a lot of cross-reactivity with the immune system, and methylation and hydroxylation. Methylation is sort of adding molecules, hydroxylation is sort of breaking things down, and this mechanism is supposed to be intact where the body is, and for vestibular and for balance and equilibrium to be sensed. Otherwise, congestion and mucus exists, and a whole range of things eventually cause prion to form into various nerve cell and disrupt and cause people not to necessarily keep their balance and things. But you have to have stopped all the prion, that's for sure. But then what are you doing to be able to help perhaps break that down? And have you heard that that material can be broken down? And up to a certain point, the body is breaking some of that down as it can. But of course, over time, if you're not living on life food, how are you going to keep your balance relative? And how will there be an equilibrium relative? So you've got a good amplitude of energy in the body and a hemisynchronization that's happening between the hemispheres, which gives you a greater amplitude of energy. So immune complexes, though, where enzymes aren't all build up, and it blocks and stops the immune system from being able to function. And that's a part of the reason why someone should take a 42 days cleanse and clean all of that material away. Epigenetically, meaning above genes, you've got a longevity clock which estimates the actual age of your organs and things just like that. But without having someone to do expensive tests and things just like that, it's possible just really like through a body reading and things somebody can have that you could learn about all of this. But you've got to have a preservation of exogenous enzyme and the value of what this is, because it's the enzyme that helps break things down. And you've got a zeta potential, which we talk about a lot, because you've got nutrient that's got to go really into the pores of the nuclear membrane of the cells, very small, and also cross over the blood-brain barrier to be able to be useful. This is what defines more a nutraceutical. So otherwise, you've got a geometry where people are living, and you've got a certain amount of magnetic frequency and radio frequency and these things there. And you've got a photonic light health and what light and the spectrum of light and things that's surrounding you more. And in the north, people could be UVB and UVA short. And in the tropics and other places, they could really have so much that it's actually bleaching a lot of the materials out that would be useful to be able to make various neurotransmitters like dopamine, serotonin, and this sort of thing. So red light has to balance blue and white light for sure. And this is something which, where you've got a proper balance of phosphate to calcium, where phosphate is excess and calcium is not kept like it should be, a functioning starts to not be purposeful like it should be. The septal or the septum pellicidum becomes lit up more in whole brain patterning, where interest and pleasure is. You've got circuitry, which is reward and so forth, social reward, and where fear isn't, you're able to cause others to be in their frontal cortex. But where fear is, it can cause people not to be in their frontal cortex at all, and only be knee-jerk to act from their brainstem. And every nation really has a certain level of, course, IQ and this sort of thing. But the system itself in the world should change well and truly, because only living beings should be, not a corporation, you see. And where you mix those two up, you've really got fascism outright, basic. But the words from is a far stronger connection than what of is or by. And so of is sort of international law, and by is really private law sort of thing. But where everything is ever more positive, of course, you've got the septal pellicidum that lights up, and it causes the frontal cortex to be lit, and it neurologically inhibits the amygdala, so you can't feel really pleasant and blissful, but feel miffed at the same time. These two systems neurologically inhibit each other. And so substances like chromatin in the cells all produce hydroxyindole molecules and these sorts of things in neurology, which is so very important because these are molecules which cause you to feel good. And so if you've got proper gastrin working upon hydrochloric acid in your upper stomach and you're really being able to produce nascent hydrogen, you've got nascent hydrogen which causes, in the presence of zinc, everything to boil, come to its boiling point. And so every element can come to its boiling point and it's reduced to below the level of hydrogen. And this is what nascent hydrogen does in the upper stomach. And so those are very small molecules which are so important because the septum pellucidum is the finest membrane in the body. And it's really sensing all these really fine small molecules, which is all the feel-good molecules, basically, that's necessary to turn DNA on and off. You must have methylation, which is 3 hydrogen atoms and 1 carbon atom, and that you need those in like atoms, just like level like that, to be able to turn DNA on and off. And hydroxylation is very faster vibration and making things extremely smaller, because then DNA is broken down into RNA and this sort of thing, and ever more reduced down to be spore on a spore level and things. And these are all things which is going on in a healthy body inside a cell. And the vestibular sense overall, is our sense of integration. And so if somebody was feeling pleasant about and being empty to go forward versus, they had a lot of stress to go forward, balance and reflex can cause musculature to ever be more active, more over the sternum and in the front of the body, pulling the body inward more. And this is where your thymus gland is, and how can that function properly, where such a force is. The thymus gland is beautiful and pink and should have a nice color and be quite distinct from the tissue relative around it. But typically it is after a short age, you could barely find the thymus anymore. And so organs like the vestibular sense, you could imagine quite considerable, very fine hairs and molecular movement and magnetic particle, heavy, is there, which gives you a sense of gravity relative, and whether you've accelerated or you've slowed down, and these sorts of things, which the vestibular sense allows us to be able to do. And prion is one of the very things which slow but sure ever causes more jerky types of automatic type of movements, which isn't it's just automatic sort of jerky sorts of things and stuff that goes on, and it's because prion has got stuck into various spots and things in the brain, but those are things which should be stopped, and you could learn about what to avoid all of the prion. But if you're doing live food, you've avoided all the prion, so that's something which you could look into a little more. So basically, gastrin in the upper stomach is so important for hydrochloric acid, and a monophasic diet, which people could learn a bit more about, which is eating only once a day, more or less, causes a cleansing that occurs for the intestine through the day more, where it could touch itself and it moves everything through to the colon and empties itself out completely. And secretin is so important to be able to cause very high north negative molecules to be present in the lower part of the body, in the intestine there. And by this time then you've got molecules that really right through the body, and it's the richness of the density of the plasma itself that youth and vitality is, and otherwise then that becomes very thinned, and because the pancreas is full of mucus, and the brain kind of become that way too. And so it's really life is more of a non-mucus diet. So you've got random phoneme generator, which in AI or in our brain is a level of threshold, which something comes to be more noticeable or within consciousness itself. And everything below that is well below consciousness. And parts of it can come to be a bit more conscious, but most of it is really below consciousness. There's only 7 plus or minus 2 chunks of information at any one period of time that you can have, and everything else is sort of below consciousness. And so consciousness itself is sort of a limited phenomenon, whereas awareness is over the top of deep sleep, dreaming, and consciousness itself. And a logarithm is, you've got to have at least 78% of anything to get something passed on, and you can have 22% against yourself and still sort of is going to get passed on. But otherwise, that a logarithm is really more in a reversed mode and neurologically inhibiting the frontal cortex and the left hemisphere, and mostly only getting a bit of brainstem type of activity where things are, where someone could just have short rote learned sequence types of things like what Tourette syndrome is, and mainly because the aversive system is neurologically inhibiting the septal, and which then causes the frontal cortex to be neurologically being inhibited in that state of aversion. And so the faculty to inspire creative influence only comes along where someone is able to be in their frontal cortex, and you and I and everyone together more, and we create better decisions together as a result of this. And you're sorting for agreement, and that's so important, where agreement is. But human relatedness and proper conditioning could be accepted. That's what common law is. Everything else is really a violation of common law. Seeking agreement is what common law is, and it's common for us to be able to have sought agreement between parts and things. And so where integration is, there's a flow between the parts, and where congruency is, there's a parallel processing, and where you're associated more, you're more in the present, more present tense orientated versus so fixed out into the future or the past that you're not present to the day. So the septal region, all fired up as it is where someone is in interest and pleasure, it neurologically inhibits the aversive neurology, and the amygdala otherwise would have been firing where aversion would have been, and that creates more limited mind functioning, and it causes everyone to have a much shorter life. The bank account for negativity is a much more stronger bank versus positive things, which positive things have to add up. One adversive condition is like at least 3 out of a bank, and we could just think of it as 5. It's better, and the bank for anything pleasant is 1. And so how do you equal 5 in a bank? What you to do is to actually add positive experiences up to equal 5. When you've got a large enough resource state, you can collapse any stuck state into that. And so that's what the science is of agreement, where things are inside yourself. And we're talking about how anybody's keeping himself company, of course. So pleasure and interest really stimulate the frontal cortex and cause whole brain functioning, of course, and social being and what's without any selective restrictive violation. So selective restrictive violations are not always, but typically would come out in circumstance where someone is into more polarization, for instance, with a lot of don't, won't, can't, should, try, but, must only, or lacking of having careful rapport and things just like that. It's not proper good communication as it could be, but you could see that you're going to get better results where everything is, where you're able to focus on a condition of contextualness, which is often missing. So contextual, with putting things into circumstance of what happened before, what happened after, and letting all those things be. But you can see that we do really good where you've got consensus decision-making in our decision-making strategies where things are. So pleasure and interest really cause that stimulated frontal cortex where you've got the faculty to inspire creative impulses of the future, and you've got social reward and things just like that, which is triggered ever more. And so selective restrictive violation doesn't exist where that is. But how do you or I or anybody witness and see what is a selective restrictive violation? But it's for you or I to actually have the power to use language and model things, to have things be better where anything is within yourself. And so ever more flow, of course, and sort of how relaxed your shoulders are, how relaxed your tummy is in life, and what is the note that you basically sort of coming from? Is it sort of more of a belly note relative, or is it sort of really voice that could have been coming from the head? The vestibular sense is the sense which actually causes you to be able to regulate things. And so once attention is paid to this, it's really to do with the integration, meaning flow between the parts, and a parallel processedness and being more associated in life versus dissociated, meaning you're really not too present where you are. And so the polycodum, the septum polycodum, is really quite beautifully magnetic inducted, and you've got a DC current that flows from one hemisphere to the other through the fluid there, and the static B field is sensed perfectly, and it's providing all this information to the vestibular sense. And how does lemon bicarb shot, when you could learn about that in the program, how good are those things which, and also vinegar and bicarb shots and things which just by itself cause you to have incredible methylation and hydroxylation, like we're talking about in the program here. So magno reaction really is improved. You could feel life colloid, which is the smaller building blocks of all of the organelle internal of a body, and also is in healthy blood. You've got colloid of life and life colloid as spore and double spore in healthy blood. And where blood isn't healthy, you don't really see much of that whatsoever. You're not really looking at any plasma density much at all. You're looking at things which has been coagulated, congealed, and enzyme resistant. And so you've got something which really doesn't have any life force much whatsoever present. And so you and I, we really more are designed to have this life force, and this is plasma. And it's the fifth state of matter, because the fourth state of matter is more a gel state. You see, then you've got solid, you've got gas, you've got liquid. And you've got a condition which is going on quite beautifully, which allows a capacity to keep track of thought, where multiple or serial processing is, where memory is. And you've got magnetic deposit in the ethmoid organ, which picks up all the micropulsations that's coming through the Earth's crust, and it's our magnetic organ, our sensory magnetic organ is the ethmoid organ, which is in the plates of the front of the bones of the face around the nose. Right in that plate there, you've got ethmoid organ, which is festooned with our body's lodestone crystal, which is very sensitive to all micropulsation and things like that. So it sets diurnal and circadian cycle and these sorts of things. But you could imagine if it's all mucused out, how's that going to work? It really doesn't too much, you see. And so a lack of insight into the vestibular sense could cause someone to sort of just go around in circles in the bush, versus someone who's really got a greater sense of things and actually could pretty much go in a straight direction relative in the bush, where most people might not be able to do that. So language, just the same, of course. You've got kinesthetic, you've got auditory, you've got visual sorts of processing. What's the flow between them? What's the wordedness in how things are being joined? And how associated to the present tense more something is. So is a verb which is in the present, and it shows how much someone is in the present. Of course, most of you would only read and find where is, and then you memorize whatever comes after is, because that's something which is, versus lots of other things is very fictional and isn't real. And so you've got an amplitude of energy which is available evermore, where you've got vestibular balance, and you've got these noble element superconductive field effect transfer conditioning going on. So you've got fifth dimensional structure, which really cause and bring about energy to be brought in from the vacuum, you see. Yeah. So the vestibular sense acts as a rheostat rectifier, and it can turn DC or alternating current into DC and these sorts of things. And you've got wavelengths of incident light, which is very critical, which reaches our eyes. And light induces molecules which are produced in the intestine, providing life colloids existing right there. Flavins and flavin-adenamine dinucleotide, which is FAD, and molecules which is very important for managing incident light. And tryptophan, again, this is a aromatic amino acid, radically is engaged where cryptochrome types of activeness is where the body is, and to stabilize direction where a magnetic field is, where changedness is in orientation to the magnetic Earth's field. A magnetic particle large enough rotate, of course, and are magnosensitive. You've got cryptochrome, which is like this, and so you've got O2H3 sort of thing, which is negative, which is caused as a radical sort of scavenging system. And you could find over 5 million sort of magnetite crystals sort of per gram in the body tissue, and yet various places like the meninges, you could have 20 times more the capacity of that, you see. And so that's why iron and things and magnetite and stuff that's a contaminant in heavy metalness, it can truly be disastrous and not too quite right where things are at all for our body. And those heavy metals and things, which isn't in a nutrient in an orthophilic state, which our product most or every single thing really has to be in an orthophilic state, meaning state with nature. So when it's enzymatically active and it's got its three-dimensional structure, it fits into connective tissue and what have you, and you've got a proper rectification and sorts of rheostat types of variable resisted control of current and things in the body. And the vestibular sense is a major where this is in the controlling of all tonus in your body. Tonus, you could imagine like if you're looking at a windsock at the airport, it's when the wind is, it's giving the windsock structure, and when no wind exists there, it's just limp. And so tonus is like the wind, if you could imagine that, you see? And so how much it is that your shoulders are back and you've got an arch more or less in small of your back relatives, got your shoulders are back, your heart is more out, and the head is more sort of within alignment of itself. These are all things which basically cause you to evermore have a greater control of flow, and you have a much greater decrease of resistance and coil increasedness where the body is, where DNA is like coil. And so where the vestibular mechanism is applied properly in languagedness and things, you could do short-term hypnotherapy, and that's the use of the vestibular sense that's wiring in a new behavior generator, which then allows the body to have a new experience wired in. The mind can conceive new possibility. And the largest way to change is by wiring in change through movement experience and your movement experience and things. But nutrients are from life colloid and from the life food and from flavins and this flavin adenine dinucleotide, which is fat. All of this really helps with oxidation and reduction and this sort of thing. So really is all derived from riboflavin and B2 and our management and ability to be able to store all of that. And do you have the proper life colloid in the intestine to have managed that? Or did the air passageways suddenly not keep its core temperature and pleomorph into cryogenic types of more molecule, which then release heat protein and this sort of thing and cause fever and that. And so core temperatures to be kept relative. And you and I, we all have a radiant energetic dynamo in our body. And through noble element, you have a semiconductive field effect transfer of energy and of amplitude, and that's picked up and directed as current more. And so a whole range of molecules is produced when you've got L. salivarius and L. planetarium in your intestinal tract, like what's in life colloid as a product that we have. Also BCT is another formula which has molecules which are life colloid, which produce selenium glutathione peroxidase and actually will eat material up from inside the intestine and turn it into a useful compound which helps produce better thyroxine and also helps clean the brain and things. It's like quite extraordinary. So you've got element like glutathione reductase, which helps protect red blood corpuscle from oxidation and things. And when you're looking at the blood, you could see how much of that is actually existing versus, oh my God, the blood just looks like an absolute trash heap itself. You've got only that life colloid exists, you've got all these B vitamins and things which allows proper transcription of nutrient and element by the pancreas and have proper pancreatic function. To have proper pancreatic function, and now you're going to have these really smaller molecules, you're going to feel good and what have you. But if the pancreas is all mucused out, how are you going to do anything where that is, you see, where cystic fibrosis is. So people could learn more and look for the show more on cystic fibrosis to learn a little bit more about this sort of thing. But basically, you've really got to have a slip, stick and bulk working good and in control of your slip, stick and bulk. And it's an important capacity is your Brunner glands, which is a big focus in Jubb cell rejuvenation, and the cleanse program over 42 days is to really restore proper Brunner gland function, pancreas and Brunner gland function. So it's really the very small molecule that's created that's so vitally needed, and hemoglobin remains functionally reduced, and you've got glutathione reductase. You've got a whole range of highly important molecules which stop oxidation, meaning rust, rot, and stopping rust and rot, and the body keeping its proper oxidative metabolism versus having turned into glycolysis, which oxidative glycolysis is really fermentation of protein and fat. And so it's really what produces energy, and how do you get that the most? You can get 38 adenosine triphosphate molecules. You've got oxidative metabolism switched back, which it should be, and you've got DNA that helps correct this, and you've got molecules that help correct that, and you've got ubiquitin molecules, ubiquitin 1, 2, and 3, which are these are things which really feature big in Jubb cell rejuvenation. So you've got blue and red color, which exists sort of like and cause various binding domains, and the ethmoid is sensing vibration and resonance quite considerably through cavity resonance. Complements everything where of course, the connective tissue is able to have its proper regulated conditioning, and tonus is going and regulated through the body. Well, and the biomechanics of the body, like, so for instance, your hamstring muscles should be, lengthened typically, because most people sitting and wearing heels and things just like that, the hamstring can be several inches shorter than what the quadriceps are. And so how are you going to ever get your back healed up if you've got a condition like that? You can if you, do cow's head pose and lengthen the hamstring muscles more. And so you'll take the pressure off the small of the back. And you see, the body functions together. The vestibular sense is sensing all, and it's deciding what it can bring information in from and what it could or would wisely shut information out from. And the pollicidum, the septum pollicidum, is a sense of bliss and a beautiful sense of timelessness and weightlessness relative, and feeling light on your feet. It's really what the vestibular system does. And you being more where interest and pleasure is, you've got much greater channel flow and access to what's information in the 7 plus or minus 2 chunks of information as channels that are below, that all is congruently causing the random phoneme generator to be able to pick through and give you a message, or have you hear what this is, because it's engaging your own random phoneme generator, basically. Yeah. So everything is sort of date specific, and let me see. Everything is state specific, meaning that where pleasure is, it's going to neurologically inhibit aversion, and vice versa. So you've really, and we've been talking about this in the podcast before this a bit, how your eye, just give you an example where other organs are as well, have radio frequency energy, which is being harnessed as a radiant energetic dynamo. And you could think of lumichrome, which is a molecule which is so very important, and it's light sensitive, and that lumichrome being present increases the respiration of cells and gives a greater capacity for respiration. And so it's light balanced ever more, so blue and white light is ever more balanced by red, and radiant energetic dynamo is enhanced where you increase more far infrared, and you use far infrared, and you're able to sweat, and radiant, wet, energetic detoxification is something which is really sought after and be the very thing which helps someone clear toxin away quite, and comes to be really what is the most advanced sorts of things which could help people cleanse. But just like what you could see when you soak seeds with a little humic and fulvic acid where water is, you'll see how incredible it is that if that has ever occurred before planting. It's like vitamin L, which really is present there, and where this is, and the body provides approximately some 40% of or more of its energy, and substrate binding domains exist as a result of making sure that you've got proper life colloid, and that being produced more by having proper Brunner gland activity. Otherwise, then life food is a way to be able to do this. And the product that we have, of course, life hydrate, is something which can be put into water and it makes HCO2. So proton translocation and these sorts of things, which all is so where insoluble collagen is inside the pancreas, all of that comes to be more dissolved because you've got extra cellular sediment and cell and things which is there, which needs to be cleared away, and enzymes and things which exist in the product all helps this quite a bit. Like blue manna gives us a nice amount of humic and fulvic acid of itself, and it's enzymatically coming from lithophile, and it has silica and magnesium in it as well in a monatomic state. And the purest forms of what this is all comes from lithophile themselves, so it's not contaminated with heavy metal or anything. So all orthophilic substance really is enzymatically active, and so its molecules really act now as like a rectanna, or an antenna, a rectifying antenna, a rectanna, and especially for non-polarized molecules, which are radio frequency energy harvesting. It's so very important to have these non-polarized molecules, so which we could explain because this is the only ones that are fragrant molecules, in fact, because everything else is a polarized molecule which isn't fragrant. So all resonant and circular-like molecules are beautifully radiographically dynamic and like a radiant energetic dynamo device. So flavins fall into this, and they connect so beautifully to element like palladium, rhodium, osmium, ruthenium, and it does this in your eye, for instance, and is the reason why you can shine a black light into your eyes, and you will notice, oh my God, your eyes actually fluoresce and have a color behind the back there when you shine a black light into the eyes. So chroma crypts, which really are there and are run off the B field, so it's sort of like a static B field there, and passive pickup of energy to run things. And so a rectified, amplified type of bucking of microspace exists. And it's your vestibular sense which helps regulate this, you see. And it's that dynamic current where a radio wave is, which all acts upon the antenna. And it's via this a Jubb constant, which is the tiniest, smallest pixelated dot, which is the conductive condition in the vacuum. So a dynamic current is directed along this conduction, in the vacuum, in our body in space. And so receptive colloid of life really are working good where cleanliness is and hygiene of your blood. Where hygiene is of your blood now, albumin is going to be raised. And that's a key function of Jubb cell rejuvenation. And so if you don't use it, you'll lose it. And so, it's so important that you'd be able to remain flexible and have good ability to be able to have good extension versus, becoming all stiff and locked up more. Your body functioning well, it is because you've got more a monophasic conditioning in the way that you did things. And it's basic that you've really got your body to have a rest in your pancreas, especially. How can you heal pancreatitis which you don't, unless you give it a rest? But if you look into the program, you're going to see, oh my God, it's like quite extraordinary. This is something which somebody should do over 42 days and assist to help change and swap and move someone back over more toward life food again. So you're clearing away stone in the body, so you're going to have a better storage of H3O2, positive or negative. Otherwise, the antenna is sort of a bit in a dangerous condition. Molecules which could give you such high conduction, like graphene oxides, which is a contaminant and things, and heavy metals and things, all could carry such a higher voltage than what should be there. And these are things that it's not compatible where the body is proper. And so where all is done, you've got orthophilic element more that comes more from life food, and you've got substance which is enzymatically linked, so it can be broken down properly. And you've got 3 different types of water, of course, and H3O2 is the water which we talk about, which is your hexagonal type of a water. And so a helicopter could fly basically like the Chikumbutsu, which you could look into. A microwave beam really is a wireless power transmission, which is dramatic, of course. you've got 34,000 volts or more or something transferred and what have you over, a kilometre and a half or something of a distance, and suddenly somebody would become aware a bit about this because of those sorts of things and observation and things. You see, 82% of all of that energy that was sent was collected at the other end, and 100% can be collected as the resonance is set. So antennas convert radio wave and gamma wave, all of this into direct current, and this happens within our eyes and brain. And so providing that a nice a resonance exists, like 432 hertz is a beautiful resonance, and all is needed is really this dipolar antenna and resonance where structure is, and you've got circular polarization, which is really improving someone's capacity to have a greater reading range of picking up pattern. And so, for instance, when you're looking at a stereogram, the brain can quickly see the three-dimensional object that it's portrayed that's in there, and otherwise somebody could be just looking at those things and sort of the brain is not really picking up the patterns like it should or could quickly. So ultra low frequency really is stored where the water is of our body, and H3O2, positive and negative, you get a voltage of energy always from this static tonus, kept like a battery relative, and it's the vestibular sense which regulates this. So life colloid participate in this noble element semiconductive sort of field effect transfer, which captures this radiant energy, and life water is more 0.432 gigahertz. You've got DNA and RNA, which is also resonant in frequency. You've got 1.91 gigahertz and higher frequencies and things. It's incredible that everything that exists, you could see, has a signature of itself, you see. And that signature is come from a shape of a fifth-dimensional structure, which is organizing plasma within itself. So just you and I, we emit far-infrared radiation, and also that comes back to us. But that far-infrared radiation is sort of has a carrier piggyback frequency wave coming off it as well, and that penetrates more deeply into the body of others around us and things. And via this noble element semiconductive sort of field effect transfer, you've got radiation that comes along, and it builds up an amplitude, and that amplitude then can be directed and used, which it is, and by the body, and by life. And so eating can't describe quite everything which is necessary to help run the body. It just can't be equivalent to it whatsoever. And a lot of energy is, in fact, actually got more through this process which we're just talking about here. So it's more than just hemoglobin or chlorophyll and things just like that, which can absorb, energy and transfer that. So then you can make glucose, you can make fats and protein and things, which the body does. And life colloid does in the intestine. It makes 26 grams of protein. Okay. So gamma wave is really the fastest wave, and that's life colloid where antenna is, and you've got T-junction, meaning little spaces that's between all the life colloid. That's a T-junction. And from this conductive effect of the cavity, a resonance exists. Flavins, which are very beautifully aromatic amino acid, all have monatomic gold and a carrying element like this, which gives us the capacity to be able to have these rectifier types of conditionings which can draw upon energy and get things to really function really great. So you've got a spin of plasma where discs are stacked where your eyes are, where a rod is, and you've got these stacked discs, and as the light comes in, it steps down, and you're ending up with a DC current that comes from this. And so light is coming through the eyes, and the current is coming about as a result of this. And so from waveform and radio wave and things, you've got gamma wave storage and transform of at the synaptic junction, which through superposition, waveforms sort of are stored in the tissue protoplasm, and it creates the state and can reactivate and bring about the state. And so all memory, learning, and behavior is ever more state specific. And you've got cavity resonance, and you've got colloid of life, which are in this sort of T-junction. And that cavity space is a beautiful flux of condensed direct current that's dynamic and inside a static B field. So you've got a static field there, and within that you have dynamic current is activated and can be and is. And so via this resonant T-junction that we have between the colloid of life, and you've got a gigahertz range that goes on, collected energy is without any input. And this is what Chicken Butzo's car sort of is about, basically. And so the cavity space where you and I are, and colloid of life that exists in our blood and body, is conductive and has a resonance and a confluent vibration has existed, you know. So it primes everything so that your body can have proper oxidative metabolism. And then this is life and wellness, and switching back and clearing off aerobic glycolysis and bringing back oxidative metabolism, so energy efficiency is existed by the cells and everything. So in a JC quantity, you've got a really absorption rate of the B field in relation to an A field trajectory of light that's absorbed by the B field, and it's absorbed 10 zillionths of the time frame that it is that it goes out. So that's how fast the B field is in relation to light. So such conducts when it's there in the superposition and all in non-localized condition as a resonant atoms pick up and a communication and connectedness exists. So RNA is produced like by this feedback enzymatic loops, and so salamanders can change their color instantly by guanine molecules that are there, and RNA does that. And so it's all sort of where something is missing in a loop, an enzymatic feedback loop, something could be created from what's before or after it. And so enzymes really give you this capacity to be able to have a good, proper high voltage on a microscopic level and have dioxygenase of chloride molecules and things like that, which really step the voltage up so that you can clear away, you know, dysbiotic bacteria, mold, fungus, and yeast in the body. So you've really got an osmotic pressure, which is a free flow through things, and you've got an onclotic pressure, which is sort of holding things in there more, and a balance between these two, so flow that exists. And basically, life hydrates cause you to have H3O2 negative and positive. As you've got proper Brunner gland function, you've got this conditioning that's going on where the body is. And vitamin L is so important to have all this function and to activate all cellular membrane and things. So the body uses enzymatic voltage, and things are more magnetic, and what goes on below the level of hydrogen itself, which things don't just stop at hydrogen on the periodic chart, but go very far below. And so you've got 4D printing, you've got south positive magneton missing, and modern blood today, and you've got a lot of north negative carrier chloride and bicarbonate missing also. And so this causes a cystic fibrotic state of a thick and sticky sort of mucus. And this is what this program, Jubb Cell Rejuvenation, really is sort of very, very much about helping correct, of course. So in the future, of course, you've got a moment where you can see how the static B field, where it is in your body, and how an A field evermore is energy which is applied, which demands this fifth-dimensional sorts of structuring. So if you've got purslane, for instance, and you've got prostaglandins that's produced because of that purslane, now you've got neurotransmitters that you could have to manage everything more for your brain. You've got this dark and light phase going on, which should have a proper balance of energy and a reversal of spin, which goes on where in the dark phase it is, and natural conditioning that goes on where this is. And so the ethmoid organ is a magnosensitive organ, like we've brought up in this program. We've talked a little bit about the septum pellicidum. Why don't you look this up and learn a little bit more about this? But the septal region, we talked about neurologically, when it's firing, it inhibits the amygdala and tegmentum, so you don't feeling adverse at the same time. When aversion is, which the amygdala has been firing, because don't, won't, can't, should, try, but, must, only, never, always is sort of a lot. Behaviors are all activated more by the flexor muscles versus the extensor muscles. You've got an aversive state, whereas if everything is more in a flow and integrated, associated and congruent, you're in a more whole brain pattern state, you see, and you've got perfect ability to inspire creative influence and have a faculty for this for the future, evermore, where you and I are. So life food can really help. This life food agrarianism is really what we should all be sort of focused more on and everything. So we've been talking a little in these podcasts about how ambient energy is collected from the field that's around you, providing that you've got proper structure, and how the eye, for instance, steps radio frequency down into direct current, and how it's a very good example of a radiant energetic dynamo. So lenses which block and stop that, and glasses which also stop that, or screens which impact lots more blue and white, which overload everything. These are all things which somebody could start to look a little bit more into. Of course, if you've got your phone in another room when you sleep, maybe that's a better way to do this, because if you haven't been able to sleep so well, is it because your phone's so close to you where you're sleeping? How much of that is impacting melatonin? It sure does, okay? So anyway, there's a few thoughts for the day, I guess. We've really had a pretty good podcast today, heading on to an hour and 6 minutes or something like that. Anyway, mate, hope you're having a really great day, everyone, as you're listening to this, and look forward for us to catch up to you in another moment in time with a bit more of this story. I think that what could we talk about a bit more where things come up, but maybe talking about the lymph perhaps and blood flow and things that's like that, perhaps. I think that's pretty good topic that we should talk about. Your lymph's got to flow before your blood flows, and your digestion has to flow before your lymph does, you see. So we've got a bit of an order of everything. Anyway, hope you're having a really wonderful day as you're listening to this. Look forward to catching up with you. Love you, mate.